clock is ticking. You know time is running out. You're not exactly sure how, but something terrible is going to happen. You don't know even how you're supposed to prevent it, but you know that you are the one, perhaps the only one, that can stop this terrible thing from happening, and the minutes keep ticking on. Now, I don't know about you, but that creates some tension for me. And tension, while not great in real life necessarily, can be a lot of fun in the context of a game. So in this video, I want to show you how I use 5 discrete phases of what I call the countdown timer approach to organizing an adventure to create this tension. And in particular, I want to give you an example, a practical example from a recent adventure that I ran where this countdown timer worked beautifully. Countdown timer isn't in itself anything particularly new. We've all seen the, frankly, somewhat lazy approach in film of cutting back and forth between a clock hand that's literally ticking away and the bomb is going to go off, and of course this creates a certain amount of tension. In the role-playing world, the grim portents idea comes out of Dungeon World, works to kind of signal different potential impending situations of doom in a larger arc, in the course of, for example, a campaign. But what I've been developing is a simple way to deploy a kind of countdown approach within the context of a single adventure. This works particularly well even in a one-shot adventure. And it comes down to 5 sort of stages. So the 5 stages are: first, you want to warn the players. Next, you want to weaken them in some way. Then you want to worsen the situation. Finally, you want woe. You want the climax. You want the terrible thing to happen. But then the 5th phase is you want a way out. You want some way that even if it comes to it, even if the kind of detonation moment happens, there is a way out for the players to potentially avert total disaster in this situation. So almost certainly the easiest way to show how this works is to just give a practical example. So I'm going to take an example from an adventure we actually just played last week. It came to be called Egged On in Skullport. And the premise was that the characters were given this egg-shaped magical object. They need to go to Skullport. They need to deliver it to this ancient blind beholder called the Blind, who lives in Skullport. And they don't really know what it is. They don't really know who laid this egg. All they know is that their mission is to deliver it that final mile, and that, of course, a beholder is a very dangerous creature, and Skullport itself is, of course, a very, very seedy kind of place. So that's the setup. And then basically we've got a sort of 3-act structure to this, running the main thrust of it, which is, Act 1, kind of investigations in Skullport to find the blind. Act 2, sort of confronting the blind, and Act 3, what happens after that, and are they going to be able to get out of the situation alive? But the egg itself serves as a kind of countdown timer, and conveniently the egg is always with them, so it can signal to them what's going on, this impending possibility of doom at any point in time. And so with this countdown timer, I literally use clock timings. So 15 minutes into the game, we're going to have the warn phase of the countdown. 30 minutes in, we're going to have the weaken. 60 minutes in, the worsen. 80 minutes in, the woe. And then from there, we're going to play out the remaining about 2 hours of the campaign with a potential way out for them. Let's start with warning them. So unbeknownst to them, this egg is in fact what's called a dream egg. It captures dreams, and in this case, the dream was another beholder's dream of a beholder. So the blind had an offspring. They dreamed their offspring into life. This offspring called Quigox then resented being brought to life by the blind, and it in turn itself had a dream called Ilix, and the dream is captured in the egg. So this egg is actually the grandchild of the blind. And he's not going to be terribly thrilled to see this, because, of course, beholders typically they fight to the death whenever they encounter each other. As a result, the simple mechanic for all of this is one of the 10 eye stalk powers of the beholder. So what I do is, for the warn phase, what I've decided is that they're going to roll a d10. That's going to determine which of the 10 eye stalks powers we're dealing with. And then whatever that is, I'm going to subtract 10 from the normal difficulty class, and if it is a damage dealing effect, I'm going to half the damage. Why? I just want to let them know that something's up. That's the warn phase. That's the phase where you say, hey, there is something here that's potentially dangerous going on, and it seems to have gone off at an unpredictable time and potentially at an inopportune moment. So the players are in a tavern called the Nibbling Quipper. Its main feature is that there is a big pond in the middle where these piranha-like quipper live, and people throw in bits of scraps of food into the pond, but it's of course very dangerous. It signifies the danger of the whole kind of tavern and the whole kind of place, all of Skullport. So they're negotiating, they're trying to charm their way into information about where the blind is. Meanwhile, the locals are terribly unfriendly and even hostile. So they're in a difficult situation. And next thing you know, I ask for a random roll. Who asks for a D10 out of nowhere? Well, I do. And of course, that unsettles the players a little bit.
Meanwhile, Marshall, over at the bar, you can go ahead and you feel something. You feel something. It is the egg in your possession sort of slightly starting to twitch and rattle. And with that, go ahead and give me a D10.
Uh-oh. 3.
And give me a wisdom savings throw.
Nat 20.
Nat 20. Not a problem. You feel a momentary chill pass over you. And you know that it is emanated from the egg itself. It is sort of stirring in there. It is clear that all is not right. You feel slightly unsettled, but you still are resolved in your mission to get this thing to the blind before it hatches.
So nothing actually happened in this case in terms of an actual problem, but it signified that something is up. And it set up the pattern that when you roll a d10, there's potentially another savings throw that's coming after that that could have a negative effect. In this case, just a chill kind of ran through the cleric's spine. The next level, which again is going to play out another 15 minutes later, no matter where they are, no matter what they're doing at that clock time, in real time, it's going to deploy, is potentially to set them back in some way. So in this case, again a d10, again an eye stalk power, I'm only subtracting 5 from the DC at this point, and it's going to be full damage if it is in fact a damage dealing situation. So we've set up a pattern, and guess what? It's time for another d10 from the players.
And as you pull out the egg, go ahead and give me a d10.
Yeah, it looks like Gideon got a bit sidetracked. But
yes.
So
Yes.
He's not really keeping
6.
an eye out.
6. Okay. Okay. Go ahead and give me a strength savings throw, and I'm going to do the same for the other 4 at the bar.
Oh boy. Better roll high.
We should have made some kind of safe word or something, an alarm
Yeah.
or something.
some sort of 16. Rolled high.
16 is pretty good. Both you and the barkeep managed to shake off a strange, funny feeling as though you're being lifted up by invisible hands. The other 3, the jawbone and the quipper slurper and the little guy behind you who was ready to pounce, are lifted off their feet and begin levitating up. They're a couple feet off the air, levitating. And all of a sudden, they are then thrown back and they go flying, and each of them goes flying, one into a table, one goes flying actually right onto the table where Lorana and Gideon are cavorting.
Meanwhile, I'm just holding the egg up like this.
Holding the egg up, and they just kind of explode in 3 directions. The third one sort of tumbles and narrowly misses falling into the pond full of Quippers. And the barkeep cries out, "What is this magic?"
I told you, it's an egg that the blind is requesting. So maybe it'd be best if we got this to him.
Out! Out of my tavern now!
So not the worst weakening. They themselves weren't actually thrown across the room. It didn't cause them a loss of hit points. But guess what? They lost all of their contacts. They were thrown out of the tavern because they threw some seedy tavern patrons across the room, or at least the egg in their possession did. Now they're back out on their ear and the docks of Skullport trying to figure out, where to go next. So they were in fact set back. They were in fact weakened in some way by this next signaling from the countdown timer. So now things need to get worse. Now we're not pulling any punches, no subtracting anything from the DC. Now a full eye stock power is going to be in effect. So they come across this character. I roll up a random character from the Spontaneous Dungeon Master's companion. Her name is Malark. She's a street urchin, and she talks out her thoughts. If you haven't watched the episode, it's actually pretty fun, I think, to see the interaction as the characters or the players are just kind of watching this character and saying things like, we can hear you when you're talking to yourself, right? But I digress. Malark does in fact lead them to the blind. They're a little suspicious of her, as they should be. But once they get to the entrance of the blind's lair, this perfectly smooth, cylindrically carved tunnel, it's time for another D10.
Can I do some kind of insight check?
Give me an insight check. And as you're doing that, Marshall, give me a D10.
No.
Oh no.
Yes.
All the running and jostling, I'm sure.
That's right. And at this point, you hear tapping from the inside of the egg.
I got 23.
23. Malark is clearly afraid of the blind. And she's trying to pretend otherwise.
I got an 8.
An 8. Okay. And at this point, all three of you need to give me a dexterity savings throw.
Mm-hmm. Oh, natural 20.
Okay.
15.
15. Okay, and with that, both Malark and Marshall freeze on the spot. You are rooted to the spot, and you feel your body beginning to go more and more rigid from within. You are beginning to turn to stone.
So you notice that the players are getting more and more freaked out every time I call for a D10? Yeah, well, and in this case, it's pretty bad. The cleric, in fact, narrowly avoided being petrified. And as you can imagine, particularly in a two-hander, when your cleric is petrified, this could have gone really, really bad for the whole party. And Malark herself was, in fact, petrified. So now they've got this statue of a street urchin. They know this thing is very dangerous, and they're going into the dangerous lair of a powerful beholder to present this thing that has been going off and causing all kinds of havoc for them. So now we're fully set up for the climax, and it couldn't have come at a better time. Literally, as they whip out the egg to give the egg to the blind, we reach that moment on the clock, 80 minutes in, when it is time for the thing to hatch.
Do you have a table or something that can put this on?
Set it down in front of me, human.
All right, kneel down and put it down in front of him. Back away. I'm like,
Kneeling is a good idea. The egg begins twitching, and it is these cracks that were once sort of filigree and superficial begin to deepen. This means, if it is from Quigox, that I am a grandfather.
Oh dear, congratulations.
The egg bursts open,
Man.
and out from it inflating like a giant fleshy blimp, comes a beholder that is exactly identical to the blind in every possible way. It is itself blind, coated over each of its eyes in cataracts. And as the two beholders levitate, facing each other, eye stalk to eye stalk, lining up.
So now you've got not one, but two ultra-powerful beholders sizing each other up in this room. The party is responsible for having brought one to another. Whoa, right? The climax has happened. The thing has hatched. The thing has exploded into life. And now things are about to get real. But there is a way out in all of this. And the way out was programmed in advance that no matter where this thing hatched, yes, it would attack the party if it didn't have its grandfather to attack at that time, but only for one round, and then it would go in search of its grandfather. The reason is that these two beholders just want to fight each other. They don't want to actually fight the party, and that's the way out, because if they did, there's no way this party of two locked in a beholder's lair with two beholders would ever survive. And so
the blind then says, "And now we must fight to the death." And roll for initiative.
Oh my god!
What is happening?
No! We are so dead.
but they didn't die. The beholders were firing off their different eye stalk powers, and the party members were having to make savings throws at various times to try and avoid the effects. And at one point, the bard dodges the effect of a disintegration ray, and although they're locked in this room and having difficulty prying open the magical door, being only a cleric and a bard, they're super strong barbarian, having taken the day off. The disintegration ray does in fact bore another hole through the tunnel. They're able to run away, beat a bardic retreat, as my bard player likes to call it, and live to fight another day as these two blind beholders go about fighting to the death. It was super dramatic. It was super fun. I loved watching the players increasingly squirming, increasingly reacting every time I said, give me a D10, knowing that things were building and building in terms of the tension with this. So the 5 phases here worked beautifully in conjunction with a kind of 3-act structure to really amp up the tension. This could have been a kind of meandering, wandering through the city, trying to get information, going to the beholder, pleading with the guy. It could have been a lot of kind of social interaction that was a bit kind of aimless. This really amped up the tension and said, look, you want to get rid of this thing as fast as you possibly can, because it's a ticking time bomb. Many different variations of the kind of ticking time bomb. There are also things in the bigger world, signals in the sky, or all kinds of things that can appear at specific timings within the context of a single adventure to amp up the tension. And I love this simple 5W structure, as it were, to deploy these things, to first warn the party of what's coming, then to set them back, to weaken them in some way, then to worsen the situation, really to make things complicated. In this case, the petrification really made things feel pretty dicey. Then the woe, the actual climax, and finally giving them some way or ways out of this. Even if the climax happens, it's not the literal end of the world. There is some way to do damage control, some way to potentially still get out of the situation, at least alive, if not with some of their dignity intact. So I'm really looking forward to incorporating this into more games. And also the one-page one-shots are just really doing well. People are loving these. It's become a silver bestseller on DM's Guild already in a short amount of time. So I'm looking at putting out a volume 2 of the one-page one-shots, and definitely we're going to have some countdown timers in the one-page one-shots as well. Hope this was useful to you. Hope if you do like this kind of thing, please remember to subscribe, leave me comments and thoughts. Are you doing something similar already? I'd love to know, in terms of kind of counting down to ill effects to create tension. Hope this was helpful. See you next time.